You deserve quality healthcare for your body and mind regardless of your ability to pay. That's why Bowen Health conveniently offers trusted mental health care, primary health care, and addiction recovery treatment for everyone. Having regular checkups with a provider you trust means they can catch concerns early before they become an emergency. For compassionate healthcare, make an appointment today at bowenhealth.org. That's bowenhealth.org.
Welcome back to the Thrive in Wabash County podcast. I am blessed beyond measure to sit here with Dave Phillips. Welcome to the studio, Dave.
Thank you.
How do you kick off an episode like this with someone who has been serving this community for a number of years? Not only a number of years, but dare I say a number of decades? Is that
yes,
okay?
You could say that. Yeah.
Is it okay? But who is Dave Phillips?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm just a naive farm boy that somehow God took along and took me places I never thought I'd go and experienced things I never thought I'd experience. And it's broadened my world. I've been able to experience a lot of wonderful things, wonderful people here in Wabash and different countries. And I'm just grateful to be here.
So tell me more about this. So you've been to different parts of the world through mission work, through volunteer work, a little bit of both, or?
Mostly mission work. I've been to Kenya to evaluate and assess our Bible college there. And so I've made other trips afterwards to speak at conferences throughout Western Kenya and Nairobi, and had opportunities to go to Cuba. And I've been to Cuba 4 times among friends' churches there.
Okay.
And that was really eye-opening, wonderful people, great spirit.
Mm. So you were traveling through the Friends Church, and they have a Bible college. The Friends Church, tell me a little bit more about the Friends Church. One, I know you were actively there. I did some research. It fit on several pages. I had to make my font a little bit smaller. But you were the lead pastor there from 1975 to 2010. Does that sound about right?
That's correct, yes.
But tell me a little bit more about the Friends Church, because I know that there are several belief systems that are woven through the Friends Church that really activate the congregation and those leaders. And you talked about the Bible College being just one of many.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Friends have been around for about 400 years. They started in England, and they really ministered among, it was interesting, they were able to minister among the poor and among the very intellectual. You know, they were able to reach a broad group of people. And they spread out to America and had a huge impact on the founding of America. William Penn, his Constitution became one of the bases for our U.S. Constitution. And according to legend, he's the only white man that never lied to the Indians.
Well, that's awesome.
And so actually a lot of Indian agents were Quakers because people trusted them. And even today in certain areas, if you tell them you're a Friends from a Friends church, you have immediate acceptance in some of them. And so that's part of our history. They were known for keeping their word. They wouldn't sign contracts. So many of them became wealthy bankers because people could trust them.
Yeah.
Friends were the first to put prices on items, replacing the barter system because they wanted everybody to be treated fairly.
Wow.
So a lot of those values of honesty, integrity, and how to help people practically.
So how then did you get involved with the Friends Church? Is that where you brought up in a Friends Church?
Yes, I was raised on a farm south of Marion. My dad and mom went to the Jonesboro Friends Church, and I gave my life to Christ at Quaker Haven Camp.
Oh, wow.
We have a lot of kids that there now from our church up at Quaker Haven on Duart Lake. And I was trained to be an elementary teacher at Taylor University, and that's what I did. I taught school at Marion at 6th graders for a year. And my colleagues found out I was a Christian, started asking me all these questions about the Bible I couldn't answer. So I said, oh, phooey, I'll just quit and go get a master's in Bible and come back into school teaching. My dad thought I'd lost my mind. And my wife married me without a job, without a place to stay. And so she married me. We went to South Carolina. And we lived in a government housing project that had just been integrated in the 1960s. Yeah. And so the church we were involved in, I was integrated in the project. My youth group were all African-American kids, and the Sunday school class were white and African-American. And so that was a learning experience. And,
sure.
And I got a part-time job at the University of South Carolina supervising the circulation department in the graduate library 3 nights a week. So there I was, about the age of college students, supervising them. And that was back during riots and protests, and it was crazy days.
Mm-hmm.
And then I studied at what was then Columbia Bible College, just with the intent. I took nothing to be a pastor. That was the last thing on my mind. But out of all that, I ended up being called to be a pastor, and it was to the Friends Church. And so that's kind of just a quick synopsis of the whole thing.
People talk about being called.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what does that look like to you? Because being called is woven over your years in this community, and that's reflected easily when you go back and look at the accolades or your accomplishments, which I know you won't like to boast
Mm-hmm.
about necessarily. But when you say you were called, what does that mean?
Well, I went through a time when we were there. I got sick. My wife became ill. My son became asthmatic.
Oh my.
It was, everything fell apart.
Yeah.
And so I went into depression, and it was really a tough time. But if I hadn't gone through that, I could have never pastored because, this people are going through hard times. And I was a type A driven personality. I got my goals. Nothing stopped me. Well, illness did. I couldn't even walk 10 yards without exhaustion. And I used to run 5 miles for fun. I was on the cross-country team at Taylor University. And here I lost all my physical ability, had to drop out of school, couldn't go to work. And I had taken a class on philosophy of missions where the professor said that the local church is still God's primary way to reach the world. And, of course, I rebelled against that. I said, no, it's not. Not my local church. And I went through a rebellion period. I said, it's Youth for Christ, it's Campus Crusade. And so that thought just kind of got buried in my mind. But as I was coming out of the depression and the illness and recovering, the thought just kept going through my mind. The local church is God's primary reach to the world. And I go, no, it's not. And so finally I had to say, okay, so what's this mean to me? And so the call was to be a pastor in a Friends church. And it was very clear in the end of year meeting. Now, what's that like? It was an inward voice backed up by Scripture. Matthew 16, Jesus says, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And so, all those things. And then another verse, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Learning to trust God no matter what. Yeah. And so I took no classes to be a pastor. That was the last thing on my mind. But a church hired me in Farmland, Indiana. And so my first sermon, I prepared for it and got up there and preached my heart out, and I was done in 15 minutes. And everybody in the congregation were looking at their watches like,
wow.
And I couldn't fake it. So
Yeah.
we closed it down that day. But so I don't know whether that answers your question, but it's the idea, the calling is first of all to Christ, and then called by Christ to do whatever he calls you to do. So for me, it happened to be pastoring. Mm-hmm. I always thought I'd be in education all of my life. I think some of the profs at Taylor were grooming me to be a superintendent.
Interesting.
But that's, I want to be on the front lines. If I would have stayed in school teaching, I would have stayed in the classroom because that's where the frontline work is, and pastoring is too. That's where you hit people in every stage of life, every issue of life. And so that was really part of the calling. How do you build a church family where you really love one another and really build that community that can reach the greater world? We're not just to be inside our own walls. And that's a challenge. Every church goes through challenges at different times, and it's a challenge.
What landed you then here from Farmland to Wabash? Was it the popularity of 15-minute sermons, or what was it what was it, or how did you and your wife make it to Wabash?
Okay, we'd been there about 4 years, and that church was not as open to me getting educated. I really felt I had to get an MDiv. Mm-hmm. I needed to get a Master's in Divinity. And Grace Seminary was just 45 minutes from here, and I'd known some people from Wabash through Quaker Haven Camp, the Curlis family through White's.
Oh, yeah.
And so I applied. The early meeting superintendent said something was opening, and so I applied, and they sent people down, checked me out, and next thing I knew, they called, and here we are. And so the motivating thing was to get that education.
Yeah.
And had no clue we would be here for 50-some years.
When you started at the Wabash Friends Church, was it still located in the limestone building that you see there? I think it's Pike Street.
That's where we started. Yeah, the parsonage is right next door. Our son Michael was 6.
Oh my gosh. And how old is Michael today?
He just turned 57.
Boy, my husband always says the days are long, but the years are lightning.
Yeah.
Boy, 56, right? That went fast, didn't it?
Went really
50 years.
quick. Yeah.
And so being at the Friends Church and being that pastor and doing it for decades long, I didn't do the quick math here. How many years altogether was that you served? And then you actually served part-time through 2023. So your retirement from that specific role is relatively recent for you.
I retired from the lead pastor in 2010, went into part-time supporting the pastors that were there. And part of the reasons I resigned when I did was my wife's health, and I needed more time to take care of her. And then when I finally resigned, even part-time, the needs were increasing. And so that's how long I was there.
So through that time and through those relationships, you have seen young pastors grow and develop, maybe move on to their next farmlands or wherever was next in their lives. And you've seen your congregation shift and change and ebb and flow and struggle and thrive. And part of this podcast, Dave, is not about, in addition to the elected officials that are making group decisions, but the people that are also in the trenches with their neighbors, our friends, our schools, our families. And we see a sampling population like that, especially in a church. Looking back at your time with Friends Church, does anything stick out through those times? Or you've seen that church struggle, thrive, ebb, flow, face hardships at different times?
Yeah, when we came, we were running around 80, and the building maxed out probably at 120. And then we had a lot of growth, and not all sure why the growth happened. I know one was we had a speaker come and speak on addictions, and that really impacted me and our congregation. Next thing I know, we have a lot of people coming in with all kinds of issues that are really hard. And I ended up doing more counseling at times than I was the other stuff, and we had to make a decision. And so that's when we started a counseling center, and we hired Scott Macon. That was after we moved to the building we're in now. But then when we started growing, we had 2 services, and we knew we had to do something when there were 35 women lined up at the women's restroom.
Yeah.
And people were saying, we just can't come anymore. We can't hear because we're too far to the back. And
Wow.
And then issues for people with handicaps because, in the old days, they built old churches with a lot of steps.
Yes, they did.
And so, that was creating issues. And parking. So we had to make a choice. Do we buy the neighborhood and tear down houses? Do we relocate? That was a long process, and that was a lot of money for a church. And so that was the struggle of just learning to love one another, listen to one another, disagree with one another, talk to one another. The Friends don't vote. If we do our business well, we listen a lot, talk a lot, and then come to the point where we discern what the will of God is. And so the choice to relocate, I thought, this is all over. I go, oh, no. Because I always said I never wanted to be in a church that built a building, but we've done it twice.
Why is that?
I'm a pastor, not a fundraiser.
True. Sure.
Yeah. And there's enough tension in the world. Why create more? Anytime you build, just even at your home, a couple remodels the house, they're still married afterwards.
It can be a test, yes.
Yeah. And so
see.
It's the same. And how do we use our building for the community? Anyway, and then challenges for missions. How do we really impact our community? And so we have a lot of creative people, And so they started the Access. One of our guys started the Access. We showed a film on, the abortion issues. And next thing you know, we what do we do about it? And so started the Life Center.
It sounds, and not to interrupt your flow, Dave, but it sounds, what I'm hearing from you, from your church brothers and sisters, your brethren, is when we identify an issue, it's not just, wow, this is a really heavy issue. It's also, how do we show up in action? How do we be Jesus's hands and feet in the world? And through a counseling center that helps address mental trauma and addiction trauma, to the Youth Access Center, which is a safe place for young children and teens to go and receive ministry, and then to now look at the Life Center. The Friends Church is a church in action for the community, it sounds like to me.
Well, hopefully, but now most people don't even know we started it, which is great because others have taken the mantle. And 85 Hope started in our building.
Incredible.
So it's, yeah, I think we're good at initiating, but not always maintaining. But
But it sounds like you're finding the right partners
yeah.
to walk alongside, initiating and sometimes just getting it started, getting all the pieces to line up. That's a lot of the hard work that causes organizations' meeting needs to fail in the early stages.
Yeah.
But all of those organizations are still running and serving.
Yeah, because it's not all about the Friends Church.
Right.
It's about Jesus and the people we minister to. So finding your role, in it. So anyway, that's kind of where we were, missional, hoping to be missional. And we've had people go to the mission field. Rich and Sandy Davis were in Kenya and build up our Bible college. So now it's a theological college, Friends Theological College in Kaimosi. We have people in our church now who go and do business training.
Wow.
And people start their own businesses, and then out of that start churches in places that they would not allow a missionary to go to. So we hope those kinds of things, increase and grow. Because it's just not about us. It's really, how do you reach the world?
The Great Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you reach the world?
And that's one person, one community at a time.
One relationship and conversation. Yeah. You have had a lot of conversations over these last few decades. I was thinking the number of lives that you have come into contact with and the different people you share time and space with, and the friends that I share time and space with who also have this strong, deep relationship with you. When you think back over your time up until present day, does anything really stick out to you that makes you feel like, I am so grateful to have been a part of that?
Oh, my goodness. I can't think of one thing. But, part of it, there's just been a lot of things. When I think about it, I'd coach baseball when my son was there because I wanted to spend time with him. And the church let me do it because a lot of the games were on prayer meeting night. And it says, we can do prayer meeting, get out in the community.
Wow.
And not all churches would have done that.
Sure.
And so there were people that came to Christ through that. And my son ended up on the Wabash baseball team that won the state 40 years ago. Which, and, Coach Rude and that team, the parents, we had real close relationships. And even now, some of them come back and we talk. And so, that stands out. And then there was a time when Mayor McAllen was mayor. He asked me to be on a planning committee, and I'm going, what am I doing on a planning committee? But a lot of those ideas are in fruition now. And just the people that I met through that and the conversations we had. There's been, I don't know, it's just been a lot of experiences and things like that have just enriched our life. My son being raised in Wabash was the best thing for our son.
Why so?
Just the community support. The church was great. They allowed Mike to be who he was. He was a lot like his mom, kind of ornery.
Oh.
And but yet, good kid. And he's still a great kid, 57, 56 years old. But anyway, and the cool thing is, my grandkids fell in love with Wabash when they visited. And then they moved here. Now my grandkids live here, raised in Southern California.
Isn't that incredible, though, to think?
But a lot of it had to do with the Wabash, connections and people here. And my granddaughter married a local guy, and she's got 2 kids and a third one on the way. And so somebody said when we retired, are you going to move to California? And I says, well, number one, if I drop over dead, my wife supports here.
Yeah.
And the second is, about the time you move to be next to your kids, they move.
That's right.
And so we stayed here, and my wife, even on her hospice deathbed, had a huge ministry. With
Yes,
people.
she did. Yes,
Incredible.
she did. Beloved.
So,
Beloved. And and so genuinely kind and compassionate. And she loved people right where they are and were. She could see something inside of those. And I would imagine those who are coming and assisting you with her care during those latter years were ministered too, right?
yeah.
They
Oh,
were
yeah.
there doing their job and their support role, and they walked away with a greater connection to Christ, which is beautiful. God will use all things for good.
Yeah.
And even in that hurt and that hard,
Yeah.
Deb was still doing, right? She was
Yeah.
still witnessing and bringing people closer to the Lord.
Yeah, even though the last thing she wanted to be was a pastor's wife.
No way.
When I
Stop
told
it.
her, when I told her I think I'm supposed to be a pastor, she goes, no. She goes, I told God I'd be a missionary in Africa, anywhere in the world, but I'd never be a pastor's wife. He played a trick on me. I married a school teacher.
Oh, man.
And yet that's what made her a good pastor's wife.
Yeah, for sure. I bet she was good at keeping your tail straight, wasn't she?
Nah.
You think back through all the different instances and places you've showed up, and then you think about now your grandkids are here, investing their lives here. Do you have advice for the up-and-coming leadership generation? We can look to those who came before us or those seniors in their lives who have taught the next generation how to give back and how to serve. Now we're coming into another generation that is disconnected, it feels like at times, and the world wants us to be even more divisive and divided. When you think about the advice you could give to this incoming generation of what that looks like for them to be a part of a community that supported your son in all his orneriness, right? And a pastor who said, I really want to be present for my son and help coach his baseball team. What advice do you give those who are up and coming and facing such hardship?
Well, they say that the next generation's the nervous generation or the anxious generation.
I hadn't heard that.
Probably the verse that's really become important to me in my latter years is John 1:14, where it says, the Word became flesh, dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. And that's the kind of person I want to be, like that way, present. So how do you be present? Well, first of all, you got to be with people. And isolation is becoming more and more prevalent. People using their phones so they don't talk to each other. That's just one thing, though. What I just read here recently, or heard recently, was a few years ago, the average person used 16,000 words a day. Now we're down to 12,000. We're not talking as much to each other. And so learning to be present. My wife and I, we'd take a ride. She'd go, you're not here, are you? And it was the idea that I wasn't present. And I said, no, I'm not. So I had to learn to be present. Attentive. I like that word, attentive. Attentive is pretty much a parallel word to love. I'm attentive to someone. I'm experiencing that love to them. And so it's to build relationships where you're fully present, full of grace, where you give each other room to fail, room to grow, where you love, where you bring truth in. And truth is not just doctrinal truth or biblical truth, but that's part of it. But it's also facing reality. Yeah. When the Bible talks about walking in the truth, I think that's part of it. Yeah. And if I picked that up from anywhere, it was the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the importance of not, and from people involved in it, that if there's even one sense of a lie or pretense in you, you're going to be set up for failure. And that's true for all of us.
Yeah.
We can't live in a pretend world. And so Deb and I, especially the last 3 years, would use the phrase a lot, we're learning to live in our present reality. You're not going to get better, but we're going to make it work. Yeah. So present, full of grace and truth. We're going to face reality together.
And doing that with her, what did that do for both of you when you used that mantra, that practice every day? What did that do for your relationship, especially in the latter months, years, and then months, and then days?
Well, it took it to a different level. I mean, we've tried to do that anyway throughout our life, sometimes better than others. We used to say, if God hadn't have brought us together, he's going to have to keep us together. He brought us together, he's got to keep us together. But learning to communicate, being present, that's a continual thing. developing conversational skills, developing good questioning skills. And I think sometimes I drive people nuts with questions.
I do too sometimes. Continue.
But it took us to a different level. They gave her 2 weeks to live, and I saw what they were doing, where she was, and they were taking good care of her. But I said, I can do this at home. So if she only has 2 weeks to live, I'll just take her home, and I'd rather have her die at home. And so after 6 weeks, we looked at each other and go, maybe we should talk about living rather than dying. Wow. So talked about living. And so it impacted, my role being a servant. Servant leadership is a unique teaching of Scripture, and that starts in the home. Mm-hmm. And when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, that was the dirtiest job you could do back then. And so I was washing her feet, but I was wiping her bottom. Yeah. And that was hard for her. Thank God I'm an old farm boy. No.
You both had made a choice, and
Mm-hmm.
it was each other, no matter what that looked like.
Yeah.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, that same application can be applied to our neighbors, the people we sit next to at church or at dinner or at a fundraiser or just walking up and down the street. It's choosing. The world makes it really easy to just be done with someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how many people leave their spouse, when things get tough?
Sure.
How many leave a church when things get tough?
Sure.
Instead of having the good conversations, talking it out, how can we grow through this? How can we reflect the love of Christ and the commitment of Christ through this? Because it's not just about us.
No.
It's not. And so anyway, those 3 years went by actually quickly. And, I thought about it. I wouldn't have done anything differently, I don't think.
2 weeks turned into a lot more than that,
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
it?
3 years.
3 years.
We'd look at each other and hospice would say, I don't think she's going to make it. So we'd call Mike. He'd fly home. By the time he got here, she was back. I don't know how many trips he made like that. But she kept defying the odds,
She wasn't done yet.
Mm-mm.
She wasn't done yet.
So it was crazy.
Yeah. But a blessing all the same in the hurt and the heart. And the truth.
Yeah.
The truth was her time on this earth was more limited than you had all hoped it would be.
Yeah.
But facing it and then choosing.
And she, when I look at all that she's been through, she did live to be 84 years old.
That's a great age.
Nobody would have guessed that. But,
Yeah.
But it happened. So.
And you had a lot of great people that shared time with you both in a whole different way those 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that you have built some really great relationships in your time while others were with Deb, helping take care of her. Then you were spending some time still being able to be a witness and share some of that knowledge, that wisdom, and that mentorship that was deeply rooted who you were, that took you out of the classroom and to the pulpit, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, since I retired, a lot of things have happened. The church received a grant a couple of times from Eli Lilly to allow me to have a sabbatical, and then they could hire people to take my place and whatever. Mm-hmm. And both those sabbaticals brought real good things to my life that actually set me up to be able to minister in different ways while Deb was sick, so I could do it at home.
Interesting.
And one was I was able to get my doctorate. I had a friend who was teaching at a seminary in California, and I heard it was his last class he was going to teach on leadership. So I called him up and said, I got a little money left from this sabbatical grant. They said I could use it to do audit your class. He goes, well, I don't allow people to audit my class, but since you're my friend, I'll let you, but you have to do all the work. So I said, okay. So I went, did all the work, went to the class, found out it was equal to 1/4 of a doctorate. So I applied for my doctoral program after I had one class done.
Now, what age are you at this point in your life, would you guess? Ballpark.
56.
56.
And so that started a journey of going to California, and it was close to where my kids live. So, hey, I could see grandkids and study. And so ended up getting a doctorate, which allowed me I now teach online classes for a little college out of Kansas. And I could do that while Deb was, I could do it at home.
Sure.
So in some sense, I'm back in the education thing, and I have 5 classes I can teach now. And then the second sabbatical led to a coaching certification where I can do it at home. And that's primarily asking questions to help people find clarity about what God's doing in their life. Yeah. And if it's technical coaching, you don't even say anything but questions. But I do a little mentoring with it, but go right back to coaching. And so those were things that while she was sick, God opened up doors so that I was still able to minister and take care of her without leaving the house.
And Deb passed away this calendar year.
Last year.
Was it last year? Thank you for that. And what's life been like for Dave Phillips after, at that point, you had been preparing for 2 weeks that turned into 3 years. She's gone home to be with the Lord. First of all, that has to be a sense of peace to know she is eternally healed.
Yeah.
And was looking forward to that point, So tell me about Dave Phillips.
Oh, my goodness. Well, the first few weeks afterwards, just adjusting, learning, realizing how tired I really was.
Really?
Hospice says, Dave, it'll take you a year to get your energy back. And
Incredible.
Some days it's really true. I get so tired. Like when I leave here, I'll probably be totally wiped out. The resilience isn't there. And that could be because I'm just 80, but they say, no, it's more than that. And so it's been kind of crazy, just kind of reaching out, doing a little more speaking to other churches and filling in like that. And then something crazy happened. Before she died, my wife talked to this lady that we both know and told her that she should marry me when she dies and when her husband died.
Well, did this lady have a choice in the matter?
Well, I guess she did. Debbie didn't tell me about this, but she told this lady, and she told a few other people besides this lady, that who I should marry after she died.
So she was going to make sure you had a partner in this world even after she had passed on.
Well, we kind of have over the years joked that Debbie might not be bossy or all this, but she was an event planner, so we called her an event planner. So she's still planning events in my life.
Yes.
And so this friend lost her husband, and after her husband died, I called her up and I said, would you just like to take a ride to get out of the house? Because we were neighbors. We've been friends for 50 years. I was friends with her husband,
Sure.
We're just going to go take a ride and get you out of the house. And this friend goes, is this a date?
Now, it'd been a while since you'd heard that word.
And, well, no, Deb says we should take dates, but from another lady, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
And I was dumbfounded. I know that just sounds impossible, but I didn't know what to say.
Sure.
And so I finally said, do you want it to be one? And one thing led to another. She had assumed that Debbie had told me. But so there were other people I was sharing with. I've started seeing this lady, and they didn't ask me who. And so I finally told them who, and they go, well, we know. I go, how'd you know? Debbie told us. So, So I've got marriage plans here in the next few days.
You are absolutely kidding me.
No.
Well, Debbie's still not done.
So Debbie didn't talk to you, evidently.
No, she didn't talk to me. I love that. Congratulations.
Yeah. Can I tell you who it is?
You please.
Hey, okay. It's Ellen Stauffer.
Oh, lovely.
And we're going to be married during our first service Sunday. The Friends had a practice years ago that they would go to their elders or M&O, ministry and counsel, or whatever you call it, and talk to them about it. And we did that, shared our story, and got their approval, their thoughts. And it'll come out of worship. Friends Church always has, just about every Sunday has a time where people can share. And so out of that sharing time, this Sunday first service, I will stand and we'll go up and do simple vows. And Bill and Ellen for years had a wiener roast at their house, like 4th of July. And my grandkids were always out here pretty much during that time, and my family. And so they were participants in it, and a lot of people in the community were. So we're going to have hot dogs there Sunday morning, a church party, and people can do their own hot dogs. And one of her family donated pulled pork, so there's pulled pork, bacon, and people are bringing a carry-in. So our reception is going to be at church, making an all-church deal. And so what the Friends did was they designed a certificate that everybody there who wanted to could sign it. So anybody that wants to sign it as witnesses. And it's kind of a covenant that you'll pray for us and encourage us. And that we want our life together to bring glory to God and good to that church and the people there. So anyway.
I am thrilled for you and thrilled for Ellen. Both of you are going to continue to do remarkable things, not only in each other's lives, but I have no doubt in the lives that together now you both touch. And it's beautiful that Debbie is blessed it before and, of course, going to be a part of your marriage going forward, in the fact that you both have a love for her. And the same with Bill, Ellen's late husband.
Yeah, both of them shaped our lives to prepare us for who we are now. You know, God's always at working in our lives. And so it allows Ellen and I to experience life at a different dimension. And that's one of the cool things about being a Christian, when you see how God works in your life over a lifetime. My doctor actually was on that subject. My friend's expertise was leadership emergence theory. Where do they get these titles?
I don't know.
But that how God shapes you over a lifetime. And it's usually the hard things that make you most effective in your ministry. And so, look, you know, Ellen took care of her husband. I don't know how long. He was sick for quite a while. And the last few months were really hard. So we both have that experience. And that's love in the heart, in the trenches. And so, you know, we'll have that in our relationship.
We did an episode last season that reminds me, a nugget that I pulled from it reminds me of something you just shared, Dave, that the growth is in the discomfort. Our world wants us to be comfortable all the time. If you're not comfortable, we fight to make it more comfortable versus really looking at what is causing the discomfort. And there is so much growth and awakening that can happen. And some receive their calling in the discomfort, you know.
That's true for me.
Sure.
And even psychologists say now, if you don't have any hard thing in your life, go find something.
Sure.
Psychology is finally, you know, it's funny, you watch trends in psychology and how it comes back to what the Bible says. Through many tribulations, you will enter the kingdom of God. In this world, you will have many tribulations, but be of good cheer. And how those tribulations create perseverance, which is character. Character formation is really what God wants to do in our lives. Our pastor had a sermon this past week. He had a quote in it from some psychologist or philosopher. It says, what parents have been doing is we've been preparing the road for our kids instead of preparing our kids for the road.
Oof.
You
That's
know?
a truth.
And so if we think stress is getting rid of stress will make us better. It actually doesn't. It's how we handle the stress. And often it will cause us to realize we can't do it alone.
Yes.
And that's why we need Jesus, and not just Jesus, each other. You know, the body of Christ, the church, the called out ones, are to be there for each other. And the studies in neuroscience, I'm just getting into it.
Let's do it.
And it talks about how there's no such thing as just a true individual. We're all shaped by others. And it's really true. I can remember my own life. Somebody came along at just the right time and made a whole different turn in my life. And our brains are really formed by input from others and the experiences of others, you know, with us. And so Jesus knew what he was doing when he started the church, even though I fought the idea.
Where did that get you fighting that idea?
And sometimes I still question, okay, God, look at your church. Now give me a break, you know.
But don't you think in those questions, those who are in their faith, no matter where they are in faith, it ebbs and it flows at times, being brave enough to ask the questions, but then pursue the answers is where those revelations do come. And at least for myself, it's never been ashamed or afraid to ask the questions very early on, you know, the very intro novice questions, to the more complicated as you look around and you're seeking clarity and confirmation. The difference in all of that is the willingness to ask and seek, not just ask and close or put down, ask and close off, but ask and seek.
Yeah, seek and you will find. Seek first the kingdom of God. Yeah. And those are all in the present tense, which is the idea it's continuous. It's not a one-shot deal. It's something we're working on all the time. Just like with Deb, I pursued her all my life. You know, and There were times it was like this, but always came back.
Yes.
And it's that way with God sometimes that we just, and it's never like this.
No.
But
Is
hopefully
anything ever like awesome, easy increase to better? It's always that bumpy
and hopefully
hills
it's
and
moving
valleys.
up, but it's still not like this.
Yeah.
But this is what we want. And to me, that is another indication there's something out there besides us. There's a God, because that's something in our soul. Where even that desire that we long for everything to be okay, where did that even come from?
The centerpiece.
And it actually came from the garden where everything was all right. And there's still an echo in our soul, one writer says. Still an echo in our soul longing for that. Why can't we just get along?
Sure.
Where does that desire for utopia come? Well, it's not going to be here. But when we give our life to Christ, he begins to put that heaven in us. I mean, we have a little bit of heaven here. My wife would call it touches of Eden.
Really?
I love that phrase.
I do too.
Touches of Eden.
You watch people try to fill those holes with things of the world and being busy. I was having a conversation with my sister, Stephanie Rogers. She attends Friends Church. And we were just talking how the enemy, darkness, Satan, wants us busy, right? Because then we're too distracted to focus on the things that truly what we are called to do, or we fill our time card, our dance card with activities. And if we're not using those as opportunities to be present, to be attentive and show love, then it's just busy, right? Then we're just burning the candle and wasting it.
Well, you're talking to a recovering workaholic, type A personality. Yeah. I was born on a farm. You worked all the time, and hard work was rewarded, and nothing wrong with hard work.
Sure.
But it has its place. And so I could remember one time my early pastorate, my wife in her a subtle way, but maybe not so subtle, said, "Could you work me in your schedule tomorrow at 4:00?"
Yes, I can relate. My husband early on, when I was starting to get a more full professional life, had made some of those awareness comments that I recognized I needed to reprioritize things. Yeah. So speaking that hard truth sometimes that we often need to hear.
Speak the truth in love. That's another very important scriptural.
Yeah. And value. I mean, if you're wavering, anyone listening is wavering on the hullabaloo of Jesus and the Bible, we'll tell you that it's rocked fact. It's the only truth that's out there. But we would encourage people, I think you would agree, is pursue it and ask. Find one of us and ask those questions.
Yeah, there's a book I've been reading, or I finished it finally, is The Art of Asking Better Questions. And he said education is backward in America. Mm-hmm. Said we should be teaching our kids how to ask questions, and then they'll start learning. Now we're just trying to put stuff in their heads, so they never think.
Fill them. Give them the answers.
And there's actually studies, if I've read my material correctly, that because of using technology and the phones, a part of the brain that does deep thinking is not developing as well as the technical side. Mm-hmm. So you wonder, why can't people handle hard things? Well, they're not taught to think deeply. Mm-hmm. And so they don't have perspective. We've lost a sense of history. Mm-hmm. The phrase, one pundit said, this generation thinks their history started the day they were born. But I'm finding even my generation have lost a sense of history. Mm-hmm. And so without that perspective, we make dumb decisions and we react instead of act. And so it's been a journey for me, because for me one of the reasons I quit teaching was I needed to know. Yeah. And so I went seeking. And I had a wife who had the same adventurous spirit, well, actually faith, that God was leading and God would provide. And he did. A place to live, a job, not what we thought.
That's usually often the case as well, isn't it?
It is. But the job was part-time, but it had paid vacation and sick leave because it was a full-time job split in two.
Sure.
And to live in a housing project had just been integrated in the South for a Hoosier farm boy.
Yeah.
Eye-opening. My wife, she was raised in kind of a tougher neighborhood than I was. And my neighborhood wasn't tough at all, at least not to my knowledge. But so I learned a lot.
Yeah, God put her in your life to help you prepare for that phase.
Yeah, really,
that piece,
Yeah, she brought so much to my life.
Yes, and still is, and still is, and that's the beauty in what love can be, is it can still continue even when they're not of this current world right now. Dave, you have, and I've got to hit some of your highlight reel here. Addition to everything you've shared, there's some other pieces here that I want our listeners to understand, because you have put others before yourself and led the best that you knew how with a servant's heart in this community. Not only did you lead Friends Church and were part of those key decision makers that include launching the Access Youth Center, Life Center, 85 Hope, and the Counseling Center. You've coached, you've mentored, you've witnessed. You were Distinguished Citizen of the Year in 2004.
And I'm marrying another one.
That's right. She's recent.
Yeah.
That's right. Within the last 2 years, does that sound right for Ellen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you were also the 2024 Founders Day Festival Grand Marshal. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that was the year.
Yeah.
Every year melts together.
They do. They like lightning, like my husband says. Those don't sum you up, but they are the results of someone who's chosen over and over again to be present, to love, to see the light in others that they don't recognize within themselves. And maybe that's a little bit of Deb's influence who has
Definitely.
shaped you.
And a lot of people that I've known, fellow people at Wabash Friends, people who had great leadership skills and servant hearts, that impacted me. And just people in the community that don't even go to church who've impacted me.
Sure.
And made my life what it is by their presence and their questions.
And now you had talked about your grandchildren are back in the area, and they're choosing this community to serve, correct?
Yeah, they've started businesses.
Yeah.
And my son and his wife have started a business. They'll be starting one here pretty soon. They've invested in commercial property. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've heard a little bit about that. I'm excited for that. Will be a blessing to our community as well. Mm-hmm. And again, you've influenced their lives, and that will continue to ripple out. Every day we get to choose.
Yep.
Every day.
Every moment.
Every moment. Yeah. So looking ahead, the next 80 years of your life, what does that look like? Obviously, we've got nuptials pending coming soon, an awesome celebration barbecue, it sounds like, to mark the occasion. But what is next for Dave Phillips?
Well, I think continuing just what I'm doing till the day I die. What gifts I have left, what energy I have left, what wisdom I have left, what knowledge. See what doors God's opened. Ellen and I both have been praying about that. What's it going to look like for Ellen and me together ministering? I know what it was like for Deb and me. Mm-hmm. And it's just never you alone. It's just never me. And who is going to come alongside me? Most of the people I coach now are young pastors. Some are older, but so, what kind of impact will I have on them? Serving the Friends Church the best way I know how with what I've got left in my body and soul and spirit. But it's pursuing the same things, seeking first. The verse that became my motivating verse at the age of 17 was Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Mm. And that was learning to trust God for my basic needs. But now learning to trust God for ministry, for impact on people's lives. How do Ellen and I, how do my fellow Christians and I impact the next generation? Mm-hmm. How do I impact the next generation? Mm-hmm. And, my generation, most of them are boomers, I guess. I'm the in-betweener, but most are boomers. They just want to go to Florida and hang out. But I want to impact the next generation, which is my grandkids and my great-grandkids.
That's right.
I got a third one on the way.
Do you really?
Due anytime. Another girl. But, how do I impact them? Plus just anybody else God brings in my path.
Mm-hmm. I like that you talked about when I said every day's a choice and you said every moment is. That's a great clarifying statement. Wabash County, those you've come in contact with Debbie, Ellen, with Bill, now you and Ellen, we are all better because of it. We're grateful because of it. And I, from my heart, want to thank you for choosing in the moment, in the day, in the week, the month, the year, choosing to love people and to love this community in such a way that continues to leave an impact for that next generation we're praying over, to continue the good works, to make them better, stronger, and brighter.
Yeah, because character is still the issue. And then out of that character, what skills, competencies? How do we help people have chemistry, the ability to relate to one another, so that they can create a culture that is creative and flourishing and impacts people's lives in deep and personal and good ways?
We don't always know what's at the end of the path. We only know and can pray what the next step is, right? And so I think that that's where we are, is what's right here in front of us.
One step at a time. If we don't take the step in front of us, we'll never take the fifth one.
Words to live by, and apparently you have for the last 80 years or so. Dave, thank you for being in our studio today. I told you that hour would go fast. Additionally, not only do we have wonderful stakeholders like yourself who choose to give and to support and to love, but this podcast is made possible by an incredible list of donors and sponsors. Recently, Bowen Health has joined that list of Believing in This Community, the Sandra Kunkel Trust, Lisa Gilman Investment Fund, Mark and Amy Ford, Paperworks Industries, the Community Foundation of Wabash County, the City of Wabash, and Visit Wabash County all make this podcast possible so we can share stories like Dave Phillips with others to listen, learn, and grow from. So thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time, I'm Christine Floor, and this is Thrive in Wabash County.